Dear learners, I welcome you to this online session on Allen Tate's New Criticism, which is prescribed for BA 5th semester optional English. I am Rudresh Aloli. In this session, we are going to discuss the definition and introduction of New Criticism, some of the important figures of New Criticism, and some of the important concepts of New Criticism and important works of New Criticism. It is going to be a brief introduction for you. New Criticism is a most noteworthy literary movement of the 20th century. It started in the year 1920 or in the decade of 1920s and flourished up to 1960. We call it New Criticism because it started a new trend in literary criticism. It started a new emphasis in the field of literary criticism. So the name New Criticism is being used for this school of criticism. It started with the publication of The Sacred Wood in the year 1920, written by T.S. Eliot. He is an important figure of the New Criticism. He influenced a lot many intellectuals in the 20th century. The term was put into circulation by Joel E. Spingarn, who wrote a booklet titled The New Criticism in the year 1911. And in the year 1941, John Crowe Ransom, another important literary critic of the 20th century, new critic, he published a book titled The New Criticism in the year 1941, as I said. The major practitioners of New Criticism are either English or American, so we call it Anglo-American New Criticism. And there is another name for it, that is American Formalism, because it follows Russian formalism. It's little different, distinct from Russian formalism, but it's mainly influenced by Russian formalism, which says that form is important and importance must be given to the literary work, not anything else. In the US, it came and settled itself as a reaction against certain prevailing modes of criticism like mere subjective, aesthetic impressionism or appreciation. In the US and in some parts of Europe also, criticism, in the field of criticism, importance was given to aesthetic impressionism or only to the appreciation of a work of literature, and it was very much subjective. New criticism is against to those ethos. New criticism is much objective and it tries to find the meaning in the text itself, not outside of the text. The pioneer of New Criticism was John Crowe Ransom. He taught his students Allen Tate, Robert Shenwarren, and some other people lessons taken from After Strange God, published by T.S. Eliot. Eliot's essay in his Sacred Wood show clearly that he was in favor of technical criticism as against to glib moralism and impressionism. T.S. Eliot was much in favor of technical criticism than the moralistic way of appreciating a work. It was a reactionary movement in its contempt for historical criticism. New Criticism criticizes historical criticism. New Criticism says that history is not important in understanding a text. Either it may be history of the author or it may be history of the text itself. That is not important in understanding the text. What is there in the text itself is important. What is there in the text should be given importance, not any other thing. Ransom strongly believed that teaching literature meant concentrating on criticism. This meant defining and enjoying the aesthetic characteristics of literature. He says that teaching literature means concentrating on criticism. The inspiration for the movement was derived from another two important works, critical works written by I.A. Richards, Principles of Literary Criticism in the year 1924 and Practical Criticism, published in the year 1921. Cleanbrook and Robert Shenwarren wrote Understanding Poetry in the year 1938 and Understanding Fiction in the year 1943. These two works provided suitable methods of teaching in American colleges and high schools for the next 3 decades. Other prominent critics who are identified with New Criticism are Allen Tate and R.P. Blackmore and William K. Wimsatt. Then what are the procedures of new criticism? How does it functions? New criticism says a poem should be treated as a poem, not anything else. Biography, temperament and personal experiences of author to the social conditions at the time of productions or to its psychological and moral effects on the reader are not important. Poem should be treated as a poem itself. A critic should not find or a reader should not find the didactic aspects or moralistic aspects in literature, in poetry. Poetry should be treated as poetry, and the biography or the temperament of the author or any other thing which is related with the author is not important. It cuts the author from the text. The new criticism is basically verbal. The emphasis is given on organic unity of the text, and it emphasizes on close reading or explication of the text. Words, images, symbols are important rather than character, thought, and plot. Alan Tate was an American poet, essayist, and social commentator, born in the year 1899 and died in 1979. In 1918, Tate entered Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, where he helped in the foundation of The Fugitive, a magazine for a group of young poets known as the Fugitives. He was associated with South Agrarian Society. He taught at 3 universities, North Carolina, Princeton, and Minnesota. He is known for his best poem, Ode to the Confederate Dead. Some of his important works are: he published a novel titled The Fathers in the year 1938. His collected poems was published in the year 1977, and his essays of 4 decades appeared in 1969. And the concept of tension in poetry we shall discuss now. Tension became a common descriptive and evaluative word in the criticism of the 1930s and later, especially after Alan Tate proposed it. And after that this came into circulation, the concept of tension. Then what is tension? Lopping the prefix of the logical terms extension and intention, Alan Tate coined this word tension. Already in logic, Tarkashastra, in logic, there were 2 concepts, intension and extension. He removed prefixes from those words and used the tension to describe his theory. And what is that? In the technical logic, Tarkashastradalli, intension of a word is the set of abstract attributes which must be possessed by any object to which the word can be literally applied. Tarkashastradalli, intention ಎಂದರೆ set of abstract attributes which must be possessed by any object to which the word can be literally applied. ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳುವುದಾದರೆ ಪದವೊಂದು ಸೂಚಿಸುವ ಅಮೂರ್ತ ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಅಥವಾ ಅಮೂರ್ತ ಅರ್ಥವನ್ನು ಅಥವಾ ಅಮೂರ್ತ ಸಂಗತಿಯನ್ನು ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ರಿಮೆಂಬರ್ ಹಿಯರ್ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ 2 words, intention and extension. Intention shows abstract attributes. Intention is related with abstract things, abstract ideas, and extension is connected to the concrete words, concrete ideas, concrete objects. In poetry, according to Alan Tate, both intention and extension should be there, or to simply, in poetry, tension should be there. Poetry or any poem should have 2 meanings, denotative meaning and connotative meaning. Denotative is what it shows, connotative is what it means. Or to understand it, to make it simple, I can say denotative means the upper meaning and connotative means the inner meaning. There are layers of meaning. Poetry says something sometime and it means something. If it is there in the poem, it can be called tension, and a poem which has tension is a good poem. The tension of the word is a class of concrete objects, extension of the word is a class of concrete objects to which the word applies. The meaning of good poetry, according to Tate, is its tension. It is in its tension. the full organized body of all that extension and intention that we can find in it. In the organic body of the poem, intention and extension can be found. If it's a good poem, there should be intention and extension, denotative and connotative meanings. A good poem incorporates both the abstract and concrete, the general idea and the particular image. The idea is abstract and the image is concrete in an integral whole. Then two more concepts, affective fallacy and intentional fallacy. The meaning of the word fallacy is wrong notion, a wrong idea. Affective fallacy is an essay published in the year 1946 by W.K. Wimsatt and Monroe C. Beardsley. It's an error of evaluating a poem by its effects, especially its emotional effects upon the reader. That means if the critic wants to identify the effects on the reader of the poetry, he is going to miss the meaning of the poem. The effect or the effect of the poetry on the reader is not important. As a result of this fallacy, the poem itself, as an object of specifically critical judgment, tends to disappear, so that criticism ends in impressionism and relativism. If the reader or critic is giving much importance on affective fallacy, affective aspects of the poem, there is a possibility of disappearance of the poem itself. That means you may miss the poem itself. So that criticism ends in impressionism and relativism. Criticism becomes mere impressionism. What the critic feels, that becomes important, not what the poem says. So what the poem says is important than what one feels in reading a text. And another concept, intentional fallacy, and this concept again was coined by Wimsatt and Beardsley. They maintain that the design or the intention of the author is neither available nor desirable as a standard for judgment of the success of a literary work of art. They say that the intention of the author sometimes is not available in the text, and it is not desirable also. The intention, you should not find what is the intention of the author. And it affects the later critical theories like post-structuralism, where they say the author is dead. So this theory, intentional fallacy, cuts the author again from the text. When the text is published, it becomes independent. The text is autotelic. It should tell. It is autotelic, it is autonomous, it is indigenous. It has everything in itself. So, the reader or the critic should not go beyond the text. He should not search meanings out of the text. The meanings exist in the text, and the text must be taken as an important object for criticizing it. You should not try to connect the author's biography, his contemporary political or social situation with the text. You should not search, you should not connect the psychology of the author with the text. You should not go to find out how a text affects the reader. If you are doing all these things in criticizing a work of art, you are going to really miss the gist of the work. This is what new criticism says, to explain it in brief. So, the intention or the procedure of new criticism is to criticize the work from the point of the work itself. That's how it started a new trend in literary criticism. Earlier criticism was giving much importance to the other aspects of the text, and it was more impressionistic. What the critic finds interesting in him, he was going to explain that, and while doing it, he was missing the gist of the text. So, new criticism says all these fallacies or notions should be avoided in the field of criticism. This is what about new criticism in simple words. You are going to understand this concept in a broader manner when you attend PG classes. I thank you for listening. Thank you once again.